Luis Salbaza chained himself to Governor Newsom's mansion gate last week. He protested asylum seekers being transferred to ICE jails, hotspots for the pandemic. Luis is undocumented and a Pangea immigration attorney. He, Luis, and 13 activists fought to resist the expansion of ICE. Pangea and PAC are members of the Rapid Response Network. We stand for immigrants and resist ICE raids. The nation awoke to the terror, seeing kids in cages and families separated during ICE raids. Yet it continues. As Trump is linked to white supremacy and racial attacks, he spent $25 billion on the wall, expanded ICE, and also limited work visas. Yet the economy has collapsed in the pandemic as essential workers rise as heroes. Immigrant workers are about 43% of the frontline workforce, according to PolicyLink. Yet immigrant workers are not eligible for Federal Care Act benefits. Activists here in Santa Clara and our various cities demand an increase in benefits and access to Federal Care Act funds in the midst of COVID-19. The census is upon us. We are in the midst of it. And COVID has peeled back the layers of deep structural inequities. The immigrant community needs to be counted. The census presents one of the most fundamental aspects of democracy and opportunity for every person in our country, specifically here in our county of Santa Clara County, to have an equal voice in the future of their communities. So it is critical that DACA recipients and other immigrants know that, one, our organizations will continue to fight for their rights and safety, and two, that they have the right to be counted in the 2020 census, and three, the census can be a powerful tool. So you may not be able to vote, but there is still a very powerful tool in your hand. So everyone, if you can't vote, filling out the 2020 census is a way to participate in our democracy and to bring fair political representation to your communities. The census influences the Electoral College. That means it affects who gets to appoint federal judges. It also affects Congress, state legislators, school boards, and city councils, all the institutions that have power to protect or harm us. Advocates and lawyers, who you'll see today, use census data to enforce the law that protects our civil rights. Census shows the makeup of our communities, which can help prove when discrimination occurs. So this conversation around DACA and around immigrant rights is so important today. So join us for a conversation with the DACA representative, with experts on immigration and faith, as we start part one of our two-part series with immigration and DACA. PAC looks to usher in a new social contract to frame a more inclusive future with a foundation of transformative love. We must support immigrants who are fleeing violence and political crisis. PAC and more than 100 faith leaders, tribal and clergy elders come together for equity and justice for all. In the spirit of Martin Luther King's justice, today we listen to uplift dreamers and the immigrants as authentic organizers and leaders show how moral courage can shape a more just and equal future here in San Jose. Hey everybody, again, thank you. This is our 13th Justice Project. I'm Reverend Ray. I am the Executive Director at PAC here in Silicon Valley. We are a multi-faith, multicultural organization who develop leaders to speak truth to power. We demand for equal justice for all, and we stand definitely for immigrant rights, and we seek justice for asylum seekers. We push for universal health care and a livable wage for all. We call for the end of human trafficking. Flor, you're gonna like that, because we need to end that, because during this COVID, our most vulnerable, our children and women, are mostly exposed. We demand access to a pathway of citizenship so everyone gets to thrive and enjoy the same quality of life. Today, we're grateful to have a great guest panel with us today. So those who are joining us live on Zoom and those who are joining us live on Facebook, we say have watch parties to help us engage this most important conversation around immigration and DACA. So right off the bat, I'd like to invite our first guest to share her name, what organization she is repping today, and what is motivating her and giving her fuel during this pandemic. I'd like to invite Flor. Flor, welcome to the Justice Project. Our favorite thing to say online is, you're muted.
Well then, anyways. Damn, I was practicing that so many times. I was just kidding. Anyways, my name is Flor Martinez. I am a DACA dreamer. I came here when I was 3 years old, and I've just been undocumented since. But, thanks to DACA, I've had it a little bit easier than most. And, I don't take that privilege for granted because it's something not everybody gets, an advantage to have as immigrants. When it comes to organizations, I currently just, I support other organizations, and I've actually been a part of PACs before. I just kind of lost touch, but I'm willing to, if you guys, are gonna get, now I know you guys are back here, so I'll be, at the next meeting. But yeah, PAC definitely helped me. They sent me out to the organizing teachings out in Tennessee like 7 years ago, and that was a pretty big impact on, my organizing skills today. And I always reflect on, what I learned and what I was taught and what I experienced in that training. And it's definitely sculpted, like, the way I handle, all this going on at this moment right now. But right now I'm just kind of an individual, just kind of, fighting for immigrant rights. Obviously I have different organizations that help me out, like, when I have protests, different local organizations that each contribute something to, make a bigger impact. Because it's at the end of the day, it's not about like who does what, it's about us coming together and, getting the job done. So that's what, when it comes to those questions, right? Yeah. But I would definitely rep PACs before anything else, because that definitely was a big part and a big chapter, Yeah.
Excellent. So thank you, Flor, and welcome. And we're excited to hear your voice today. Next on our docket is Huy. Huy, go ahead and tell us who you are, what organization you're with, and what is motivating you or giving you gas during this pandemic.
Absolutely, and thank you for inviting me on to this, Reverend. Working, getting to know you more over last year and seeing the work that PAC does is definitely part of the motivation that keeps me going during the pandemic, but even before then. So my name is Huy. I am a partner with Justice at Work Law Group. It is a firm that I founded with my partner, Tomas Margain, in 2013. Our firm focuses on workers' rights and social justice. And so the vast majority of our work is plaintiff side. But we get involved in immigration work because labor violations and immigration are just intertwined in such a way that there's really no way to separate it, right? When you fight for the rights of workers, you have to fight for the rights of immigrants. My personal motivation for this came actually because my parents are refugees, and seeing how our family struggled as we grew up, made me realize in my later years that we have a responsibility to create space for all families, not just to survive, but to thrive. And so that's kind of where the advocacy for me begins. And I do most of my advocacy through my law firm, Justice at Work Law Group, where we are also part of the steering committee for the Wage Theft Coalition of Santa Clara County. I also, right now, working with homeless community through the Unhoused Response Group, where our focus has really been on getting food and hygiene kits out to the community, to people in need, so that our unhoused neighbors can also stay clean and stay healthy during the pandemic. And lastly, I have the distinct pleasure of serving with Mimi on the board for the Vietnamese American Roundtable, where we organize and mobilize around quality of life issues that can help us all.
Hey, thank you so much. I just look forward to just spending more time with you, and it's been a good year getting to know you, and grateful that you're here with us on the Justice Project. Next on board is my good friend, Reverend Sammie. Introduce yourself, what organization you're with, and what is giving you gas during this near empty gas season of COVID-19.
Thank you, Reverend Ray. So I am the Reverend Sammie Evans. I am the pastor and head of staff at the Stone Church of Willow, Glen. And as Reverend Ray mentioned, I have been feeling kind of low on gas. It's been a really tough season. I think personally, as a church, as a city, as a nation, but the things that like continually fill up my tank are the justice series. I mean, I've been tuning in since the beginning. I've been loving to listen to all of these, and so it's really a special honor to be a panelist, to participate today, and to be in conversation with y'all. I also think it's just the fact that people just keep showing up, right? Every single day, people are showing up, doing the work, protesting, learning, speaking up, speaking truth to power. And that is just super heartening and encouraging, especially when the evils of white supremacy just seem insurmountable. And then the other thing, I just want to give a shout out to the session at my church. These are the elected leaders of the congregation. They have just been extraordinary throughout the last several months, really, of one mind and purpose, coming together to discern really difficult things and to make really bold moves. And so, them and just other groups that I'm a part of, just continuing to show up and show up for justice and show up for one another, just really keeps me going.
Thank you, Sammie. I mean, and we'll talk about how families show up for other families a little bit later as we get going. So I'm happy to have you. Last but not least, a new mother doing double duty, maybe quadruple duty for all we know, introducing an amazing person. Mimi, tell us who you are, what organization you represent, and what is motivating you during this pandemic.
Thank you, Reverend Ray, for having me. My name is Mimi Nguyen. I'm an immigration attorney with Catholic Charities. I've actually worked for multiple nonprofits doing immigration work in San Jose. So I've worked with Asian Law Alliance, Step Forward Foundation, and now I'm at Catholic Charities. So I've been doing immigration work for the past couple of years, about 5 years now. And I wear a couple different hats. I just finished my term with the Vietnamese American Roundtable as the president, and we do advocacy work and we mobilize the community to bring the community together and educate the community. I also am the president of the Vietnamese American Bar Association of Northern California. So we bring attorneys together and make sure that, the minority attorneys are represented in the community and that our voices are heard and that we can help push for more politicians and judges that are APIs to be on the bench. So that's what I do in my professional life. I'm a new mom, as you mentioned, and she is actually one of the reasons why I'm still doing what I'm doing in this difficult time right now. But what's motivating me is just that this current administration is just so bad towards immigrants and the anti-immigrant rhetorics and the policies that are affecting all of our immigrant brothers and sisters. It's really important for us who have a voice to speak up and help those that don't. And, my parents were both immigrants. They were refugees here. They were discriminated while they were here. And hearing their stories and their experiences make me want to make more positive changes for those that are in similar positions. And so that's why I have, the fuel to keep doing what I'm doing, especially right now when everything is against immigrants. Everything is against immigrants. Everything is against brown and Black folks. So it's our duty, those who have some voice right now, to speak up for those that are in need.
Thank you, Mimi. And we're excited to hear your voice, and congratulations again on your newborn baby girl. We say blessings, and that may her life be fruitful, and may we create a world that is better for her than we have had. So thank you all for your introduction, and thank you all for joining us. Before we jump in, right off the bat, there is a Facebook group recently created in case people want to connect with other DACA recipients from Santa Clara County. And you can get more information and more resources. So that Facebook page group is called Dreamers in action. So Dreamers, spelled out Dreamers, DREAMERS, and NEN in action, ACCION. So we could put that in the chat box and put that in the Facebook thread, so that as those who are listening, if they want support and more information and resources, they can look there and join that group. So right off the bat, a good friend just sent me some information. So I'm going to share leading into Flor sharing information. So nearly 800,000 Dreamers, 24,000 eligible in Santa Clara County received critical deportation protection and work authorization under the 2012 DACA program. DACA has allowed Dreamers to work in every industry and at nearly every single major company in the US. Over 83,000 people in the county, that Santa Clara County, are legal permanent residents eligible to become US citizens. So right off the bat, let's talk about Dreamers. And I want to invite Flor to answer this question based on your experience. What, Flor, has inspired you to take the mic to share issues facing DACA Dreamers and your own struggle?
I think the most simplest answer to that is the fact that, you know, there's so much fear installed in, like, into the immigrant community. And, you know, even still to Dreamers, you know, there's still that fear, like, that we've been, you know, passing on, you know, through all these generations. So, you know, just being able to be the voice for the, you know, the frightened, the silenced, the unheard. That's really what, you know, gets me to really push the issue on immigration, on Dreamers, and just, you know, keep bringing awareness every day. And also, you know, I watched my mom, she's a big advocate for, you know, for other mothers when it comes to charter schools, or, you know, when it comes to, like, the Black and brown community and the school system and how they're treated. I saw her, you know, they succeeded in opening other charter schools, and she would get up there on the mic, you know, with, you know, even broken English, but she would speak for the mothers that didn't speak any English at all, that didn't really know what was going on. So I was, you know, very young watching that happen. I know that definitely inspired me to use my own voice, you know, for others like me, you know, which is, you know, immigrants, Dreamers, you know, all of it. And so ever since, I've just been fighting, and I've made it like my mission, you know, to get the voices heard, because it feels like, you know, they're still silenced, you know, as much as we want to encourage them to come out. It's really hard. It's easier said than done, you know, because that fear is still very much there, especially now with Trump and everything else going on. So I just, you know, I just continue just going harder and, you know, spreading out more awareness, you know, to these immigrant stories and immigrant voices. So it's just pretty much, yeah, being the voice for the unheard, because I've seen the fear, I've felt the fear. And I know what it's like, and, you know, no one should have to feel like that. So that's why I go hard, you know.
You go hard in the paint. Thanks,
Yeah.
Flor. And let's talk about another question before I move on, and trying to tap into a little of your experience. Talk about the fight to uplift unity between Black and brown locals here in San Jose. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So when it came for the unity, well, okay, so I actually held a unity march on 4th of July, and it was awesome. You know, my intentions are, you know, Black and brown unity for systemic change. And there was a great outcome of people. And I feel like San Jose is pretty good about unity. We're a very diverse city. We happen not to have a lot of, you know, Black popularity here. I believe it's 2% or less here in San Jose. But, you know, the outcomes to the BLM protests were, like, you know, humongous, you know, so you saw that unity, you know, when it comes to, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement, and it was great to see that. And now, you know, we're just, I guess we're in a time where, you know, now we're kind of, you know, giving some light to the whole immigration issues, you know, and ICE and everything, you know, is finally getting some, you know, some leverage than it used to be. And so, you know, I guess we'll just kind of see how that goes. But San Jose is a pretty big, like, you know, Latin popularity too as well. So, you know, I hope they come out, because, you know, like I said, immigrants aren't going to come out. As much as we've tried, as much as, you know, we want to, you know, they're still living in that fear. So I guess it's a matter of, you know, for example, Saturday I have the protest. And we'll see, you know, I hear we're going to have a big outcome for the Abolish ICE protest in Morgan Hill, 4 to 6 p.m. ICE office. So we'll see from there, because Unity's been great everywhere I've been. I haven't had any, odd encounters when it comes to Unity, but that also, we live in like a Bay Area, such a wide range of people from everywhere, just with the same dreams. So, thankfully I haven't had to, experience anything otherwise. But Unity is definitely the key. So I keep pressing that agenda, and that's, what we need to get across. That's the only way we're going to make change, because we come in numbers, and, big numbers, big results. So
absolutely. Now, when's your next protest again? You said it was at the ICE office. It is
Saturday in Morgan Hill at the office, the ICE office. And then from there, we're going to go downtown. And then from downtown, we're going to get back to the ICE office. And there's been a lot of place. What was that?
Yeah, is there a place where they can find that information, just in case they didn't catch it?
Yeah, you can go to abolish-icebayarea.com, or my Instagram is Flower in Spanish. Those 3 words together, because my name is Flor.
Flower in Spanish.
Instagram is Flower in Spanish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, so, thank you.
Yeah, actually, I just want to mention real quick before we move forward.
Definitely go ahead.
There's been a lot of talk for 2 weeks now about counter protesters, and then actually, as of yesterday, they had a spokeswoman from the city had to make a statement telling them to cancel the counter protesting, because they were very concerned about that. So just keep that in mind. Morgan Hill, I think, might be a different scene. Like I said, I graduated and from middle school and high school there, but I'm getting ready for that. So I would love if you guys came out, because we need all hands on deck, because they made a whole Facebook, telling people to come out to counter protests, and there was a lot of comments and stuff. So
thank you for sharing that, because
all hands on deck. Yeah.
We want people to feel safe in all environments. So that leads us to one of the things you mentioned, that you wish more immigrants would come out, but rightfully so, they're fearful, right? The unknown. It's easier to stay safe and secure. So in some of our talking points, California has a very positive view on immigrants. This is important to know. Nearly 3 in 4 Californians, 72%, believe immigrants are a benefit to the state because of what they bring to the state, compared to only 23% who believe that immigrants are a burden. We know that's not true. Even larger share, 84%, believe that there should be a way for undocumented immigrants to stay in the country legally. And a majority, 58%, favor state and local governments making their own policies. So here we're in Santa Clara County, should be able to make our own policies relational to our brothers and sisters, and taking action separate from federal government to protect the legal rights of documented immigrants here in California. So let's talk a little bit about protection. Sammie, I want to bring you in, because you're a part of the Rapid Response Network. The Stone Church has been trained. Speak about how the Rapid Response Network provides kind of a safety net and kind of a protection from the fears that some of the immigrants experience.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. I felt really convicted by that, Flor, when you were speaking about the fear that folks have. That's something that our congregation, that is predominantly Caucasian, has been able to really show up for undocumented and immigrant folks in this way, because we're not at risk, so we can show up at ICE, we can show up at hearings, we can be there, and no one's going to question whether we have papers or not, right? And so that reality has been something that we have learned through experience, and has hit us really hard. So the Stone Church actually has been connected to the Rapid Response Network since really January of 2017. Rosa De Leon came and talked about her life as a DACA recipient, and then as the Rapid Response Network was really being formed, a bunch of folks from Stone Church became trained rapid responders who would show up when, there was a lot of ICE activity. This was right after the election. And so the Rapid Response Network at that time was really about when there was ICE activity in a community, to show up to record with phones what they were doing, to make sure that they had some serious accountability. Because if they can just do whatever they want and feel like there are no consequences, and that Californians aren't going to show up and denounce what they're doing, right, that injustice will just continue. So we've had some folks trained to be those rapid responders, but then the Stone Church also decided a few years ago to become a sanctuary support congregation. This was when cities were becoming sanctuary cities, organizations and religious institutions were kind of following suit. And I don't think anyone really fully knows what that means or what it might demand of us. But as a congregation, we felt, we have tangible resources and social capital, thus we have a responsibility to act. So we made that commitment. And then when we learned about the accompaniment teams, it became pretty clear to us that this was another way we could even, live even further into that commitment that we made. So a few years ago, Jesus came to Stone. We hosted a accompaniment team training, and we learned about what it means to accompany a family when someone's been detained by ICE. And that took us even deeper into the work, and we did accompany a family, and we just learned so much about the cruelty of the system, the cruelty and terrorist tactics of ICE, and how they, just seek to divide and conquer our communities. And so that's really what keeps us engaged in this work, and even deeper now into the Black Lives Matter movement, right? Because it is the same tools of white supremacy that are dividing and conquering us as a people.
Yeah, that's a great point. When we talk Black Lives Matter, many people think we're only talking about Black lives, but we're talking about the policies, the racist policies, the racist playbook, the racist history that was used historically to oppress Black folks. It's the same playbook. It's the same policies that are used to oppress our immigrant and DACA brothers and sisters. Yeah. So this coalition and way of understanding is very, very important. Now, question for Mimi and we, how do we disrupt this systemic racism against immigrants? I mean, how do we disrupt? We've had some wins at the Supreme Court, but how do we create sustainability? What do we do in those situations? And Mimi, you can jump in first.
So some of the ways that we can disrupt the systemic racism that we see in our country is, providing more access to folks that need it. So the immigrant community, one of the things is there's a lack of access. There's a lack of knowledge. So Know Your Rights efforts and presentations are really helpful for the community. Providing resources, legal aid, legal services to the community is all very helpful, but that takes a lot of funding, a lot of support from community organizations, from the county. We need to make these changes on a policy level. But if we can't make it on a policy level, it starts at the grassroots. The community-based organizations, legal aid services, nonprofits are what we need, and that's what you start at the ground level. And then what we really need to do is have some comprehensive immigration reform. What we're dealing with really antiquated immigration laws, and the laws are they were created to hold people down. Like you said, it's institutional. It started, way back, and it oppresses people, and it goes all the way from the schools to prison to deportation pipeline. Like, it starts in our own community, and these policies, they're overarching, and it affects our community from individuals to the bigger communities. So providing access to resources, legal aid, and then making more bigger policy changes is what's going to help us really make a difference for folks.
Excellent. I truly believe policy is always the first step, and everything else is second, because policy will bring about a legal guideline of what must happen to provide equity. But we, as we know, policy can be changed, but how do we keep our stakeholders and our electeds held accountable to do just that once these policies are passed? What do you think we need to do to hold them accountable? What can we do?
Well, yeah, I kind of wanted to piggyback off of like Mimi just said here, because this summer, like you were talking about how do we disrupt, right, the oppression that we see to bring about these policy changes. And this summer, I've got to say, has been like the summer of disruption, right? I mean, we see people like Flor coming out and planning marches and protests, and then people coming out, and not just, like Black Lives Matter, of course, is focused on Black lives, but the showing of the allies has been immense, right? And so the disruptions that are necessary, the disruptions that take place, they can lead to policy changes. I mean, we're seeing this across the country right now, right? And you're absolutely right, Reverend. Like we have to focus on policy, because those policies is how we set the tone, right? It's how we can set the floor for how people should be treated. And we also open up the possibilities, through the roof and through the ceiling, so that people can actually, survive and live and thrive here in wherever you live in the state. So, in terms of keeping people accountable and keeping people ready to go, right? Like the momentum that comes out of what we saw this summer and the kind of activism that we have seen over the past 4 years, that energy has to continue. Now it can transform, right? We can transform the energy that came out of the Women's March. We can transform the energy that came out of the March for Science, the March for Life, Black Lives Matter, right? We transform that by putting forward good progressive candidates who will maintain the policy changes and expand on the policy changes that were achieved through these moments that have forced us to look at how we view life, how we view society, and how we view our roles. And we put forward those people, move them into the halls of power so we can protect those gains and expand on them, right? There's a role for policy because policy impacts everything part of our life, right? But I think there are times when we get the policy changes we want by being the disruptors, right? And that is pretty much what we've seen this past summer. It's been amazing, right? So that's how we can get people moving, right? I mean, we can't, oftentimes people will say, hey, look, I don't want to deal with politics. I see this, I'm going to do this because this is the right thing to do. But I'm going to ignore politics. The problem with ignoring politics is that if there's an old saying, right? If you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? We can't just ignore big politics and ignore elections and expect that everything we fought for to stay in place, right? So for us to bring about these changes, sometimes what we see this past summer is absolutely necessary, as it was necessary during the Civil Rights Movement, as it was necessary during the abolitionist movement, right? Those changes can be brought about during these moments that feel completely calamitous, but can produce amazing transcending results. But then we keep that by moving into the halls of power and making sure that we use that position to transform not just the laws, but transform our perspective to recognize that these things that people fight for, they should be fundamental. They should be available for everybody. And this is the kind of environment we want to create for our society, for our country, for our communities.
Absolutely, right on. I mean, I'm loving the conversation because Flor is out there in the grassroots with her boots on, her fist in the air, but she wants more people to participate, but they can't because of fear. We have this protective covering and safety net within the Rapid Response Network. And I want to jump back up to you, Sammie, really quick. But Mimi highlighted, you said that we need to get information. People need information, right? They're lacking the information. And our political will is in our ability to, one, vote. And if we can't vote, fill out the census, because our census will give us more reflexes or more resources to fight this fight, to fight for more better policies that our stakeholders can be held accountable for. Now, listen, I mentioned earlier that over 72% of Californians favor immigrants. So that says that there's a transition that needs to happen from this feel-good, progressive, I'm in favor, to a legislative, let's vote a moral budget that protects our DACA and our undocumented. We can do that here in Santa Clara County. right now, we need to revisit and have the moral courage to establish moral budgets. We already know, yes, the next 2 years we're going to be hurting because the trailing years is how we develop our budget. But at what cost do we put our more vulnerable or more in a vulnerable position? So there's a budget that just needs to be obtained. The Rapid Response Network, Sammie, from your experience, what do you think would happen if we don't establish a moral budget and we underfund this safety net for our undocumented? What do you think some of the things that will happen based on your experience and the Stone Church's experience as being a part of the Rapid Response Network?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the same way that the pandemic has really just like pulled back the curtain on all of the injustice that's always already been there, but becomes just clearer and exacerbated with this, I think that's what will happen. I mean, it will continue to consolidate power and wealth with the ruling elite and continue to keep everybody else at odds, battling for the crumbs, right, that are left. And if you'll allow me, may I put on my preacher hat for a moment? That'd be all right. So I like to, as a Christian, I'm called to proclaim the gospel. And this phrase has become so loaded that I just want to be very clear about what that means. In the ancient Near East, the king, right, or the emperor would send out his messengers to deliver good news, right? And this good news was usually a tax hike or something that was never, ever, ever actually good news for his subjects, right? And so the gospel, this is just a Greek word that literally means good news. And this good news of Jesus Christ is supposed to be unapologetically and unequivocally for those who are poor, those who are oppressed, and those who have been trampled upon. And this good news is not supposed to be delayed. It is supposed to be here and now, enacted, embodied, and brought into being, right? And so I feel like people who are Christians and really any other major world religion have this at the crux of our faith to create a place, right, that is equitable and just and beautiful where all people can thrive, right? And right now, our empire, this great American empire, is putting out a budget, right, that is the king's good news. And we have a responsibility to put out a budget that is good news for the oppressed and the trampled upon and those who have historically, systemically, and continually oppressed, right? And so I think if we do not stand up as a people and decide that we want to live in a cooperative society, that we don't want to continue to be divided and conquered, we don't want to continue to let the empire values decide who gets the money and the resources, then we're going to continue in this scarcity model, battling for crumbs, and just devolving into the worst possible community that we could be.
Absolutely. That's why we must come together and recognize that we direct where our taxes should go, and we have to exert our power. I want to move on to this area of rights and the attempt for them to be erased daily by our current administration for DACA and immigrants. The majority of recent arrivals are from Asia. When we look at our undocumented, the API is booming here in the Bay Area. So the vast majority of Californian immigrants were born in Latin America. They're 50%, or Asian, 40%. California has a sizable population of immigrants from dozens of countries. The leading countries of origin are Mexico, 4.1 million, China, 669,000, the Philippines, 857,000, Vietnam, 524,000, India, et cetera, et cetera. So, however, the most largest group, as I mentioned, is the API, growing at representing 56% of those arriving from 2010 to 2017, they've come from Asia, and only 29% from Latin American countries. So as you see, we're leveling off here in the Bay Area relational to our immigrants. So Mimi and we talk about the Vietnamese community and the influx of immigrants coming from Asian countries, and how do we begin to meet those needs? How do we keep them, as Mimi says, informed and teach them about policies?
Sure. Actually, this is one of the principal areas of VAR's work. Right? Our mission is to inform, mobilize, and advocate for the community. So one of the ways that we've been doing that is just during the pandemic has been to hold like weekly live streams where we present information that's bilingual. Right. Our VAR actually began as just a group of friends, and it just so happens though that this group of people who have been working together for years tended to be very heavily involved in policy and law. In fact, when our first board was created, I'm pretty sure half our board was lawyers, which meant we were very careful and we knew, what not to do to get into trouble, right? But that said, we, when the pandemic hit, we recognized right off the bat that one of the biggest problems we were going to face was that the Vietnamese community was still, there were still many people in the Vietnamese community who were monolingual. So, we had to get the information together. We had good folks in our team who knew where to go for resources, who knew what information to look for. And then, and on the other end of it, we had folks in our team who knew how to translate and communicate it in a way that would be effective. So we've been able to use ethnic media, we've been able to use social media, and we've been using weekly emails to make sure that the crucial information that's important, not just about resources to get through the pandemic, but changes in law and policy get communicated to our community as well. We're talking about the broader trends here in terms of the growth of the API community. Honestly, that doesn't surprise me, right? This is something that we have seen happening over the past decade, that the API community has been growing immensely. Unfortunately, the sense of unity that Flor talked about, right? I would actually say that that's not present in the API community. And well, let me just speak more specifically. It's not present in the Vietnamese community right now, right? During the Black Lives Matter movement, we have actually had to, VAR came out very clear. We stood with Black Lives Matter. We thought this is a fundamental issue. This should not be controversial, and yet it was, right? So part of our work right now, in terms of building allyship, and continuing to support, other communities and build those relations, has been to have those really difficult conversations within our own community to analyze the anti-Blackness that's present there. Right, and this unity has really been generational, right? Like the people who came over as refugees, right, who came over, fighting and escaping oppression themselves in Vietnam, are now, completely in disbelief that this system of oppression exists here in America. And some of it can be thought and understood, but it's just pure gratefulness, right? Hey, we're here in America, we've had opportunities, and sure, we've struggled, but we're making it and we're surviving here, and we don't live under a communist regime in Vietnam. So we should not see any of the bad and wrong that exists here in America. But Hassan Minhaj said it best, right? When we came here to this country and we adopted the American identity, we can't just adopt what we think are the positives. We have to adopt and accept the flaws so that we can continue to improve our country as well. The new country that we call home, and the place where we are now living and thriving and building our own families.
Okay, that's some work that we need to do in all of our communities. But thank you for the transparency and the shared vision within the Vietnamese community. But that racial ethnicity, that anti-Blackness, that anti-colorism thing that we all have in all of our communities must be addressed in order to see everyone as equal and the same. But thank you for sharing that great insight and great work. Mimi has to get out of here, but I want to ask you one more question because she has mother duties, so we appreciate you. So Mimi, can you, hold on a quick second, I'm doing multiple things here. Can you give us some insight on the current state of DACA benefits? And maybe you can share some insight to some things that can help Flor and her community of Dreamers.
Okay, just to circle back a little bit with Hui's comments, I agree with everything that Hui says. He just kind of nailed everything that I would have mentioned. The other thing that I would mention that is hard in our community is that folks do get information through ethnic media, through social media, but the information, they don't fact check the information. So the information that's given, sometimes it could be very one-sided, and it could in fact be misconceptions or even incorrect at times. And so we see that a lot in the Vietnamese community. So that's something to look out for if like there are elder people in your family or in their families, that if there are information that's being disseminated that is in fact wrong, to kind of clarify and to just fix and talk about what's wrong with it, and give them information that's actually right, because we see that a lot in our community. And I think it's across communities that are for monolingual speakers, and that's really important right now. But on the DACA front, there was a huge victory in the Supreme Court that said that what the Trump administration, the way that the Trump administration tried to rescind the DACA program was unjust, and they didn't properly go through the channels that they needed to actually rescind the program, which means that if they do go through the proper channels, that that at some point, if the administration decides to do it, there is a right way of canceling DACA or revoking DACA for Dreamers. Some of the current updates for DACA right now, even though the Supreme Court has said that DACA should be revived back to the 2012 DACA, meaning that anybody who is eligible should be able to apply. However, what the U.S. Immigration and Citizenship Services are saying is that they're no longer and not accepting new DACAs. So even if you are eligible, they're not allowing you to apply. So there's a bunch of litigations that have just started. And this is just another way that the administration is trying to use to prevent immigrants from getting the benefits that they currently are supposed to have. Which is unfortunate because there are a lot of people who are eligible to apply that can't apply right now. And even if they've applied, their applications have either been rejected or being sent back without even being reviewed. And then the other update is they are changing the work authorization from 2 years to only 1 year. And they're going to increase the fees on DACAs as well. So not only are they making it harder, instead of giving 2-year work authorizations, they're only giving 1-year work authorization, meaning you have to renew within 3 to 6 months before it expires. And then now it means you have to do it every single year annually. And so they're increasing fees. They're just making it a lot more difficult for immigrants to gain any sort of benefits to make their lives just a little bit easier. Some of the things that DACA recipients and even the community can do is fight these policies. Reach out to your local Congress members, representatives in your area, so that they understand that there's a need for DACA. This is how we keep our community and our economy going. Most of our workforce are immigrants, and if they're unable to work, unable to file taxes, it makes it really hard for all of us overall. And it with the help of immigrants and their ability to work, it actually helps our economy strive and thrive. So those are some ways that us as individuals can make a huge difference for DACA.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely. Flor, does that information help? Do you find your brothers and sisters at your age struggling financially just to pay the fees, even if they can't apply? What has been your experience in that process with your peers?
With DACA?
Yes.
Well, luckily I'm always looking out for organizations that, might be able to help with like funding. And thankfully there has been. But I know that, $500 is a lot for like a lot of people. So I think most of the applications, well, from what I understand, are I think sponsored. I'm not sure, because everybody that's asked me for, locations that can help with applications, they've also asked me, do they sponsor, and like, what's the deal with that? And it kind of sucks too. I hope it does not say that it's 1 year now, because then that means it's $500 every year. Yeah. So it's definitely not easy. I think And then the fact that people don't even have DACA to work during this time. So it's just like, I can only imagine, not getting unemployment, not getting a stimulus check. Or even, I heard that, citizens who married immigrants and made them citizens, they didn't get a stimulus check either. Neither of them. So it was like a way of punishment. And not a lot of people talked about that. I mean, but yeah. So yeah, when it comes to like DACA fees, right? Yeah.
Can I just hop back in and kind of answer a couple of those questions? So there are a lot of nonprofit organizations that are helping, that were and are helping DACA recipients with fee assistance for both the application fee and the legal service fees. If they went to a private attorney, it could cost over $1,000, but some of us have grants that were able to pay for both the application fees and the legal and not charging for legal services. So we're lucky that we're in Santa Clara County and that we do have the support of the county to help DACA recipients. So that's one of the things that is great about our county, is that we have diversity and that the supervisors know that it's important to keep the fundings for DACA recipients, even though the fundings, they do run out, but for the most part, if people really needed assistance, there are programs and organizations that do help. And then one last plug, at Catholic Charities, we were involved with the disaster relief assistance for immigrants. So the DRIES, that was the fund that was given to undocumented folks that didn't get a stimulus check from the governor, approved by the governor. So Catholic Charities of Santa Clara, San Mateo, and San Francisco were Santa Clara and San Francisco for sure. I think the last one was San Mateo. We were able to disperse over $4 million to undocumented folks. It was $500 stipend checks, but that is better than nothing during this time, during this pandemic, during a health crisis where people are losing their jobs. So we were able to assist with that, and our team pretty much handled all of that. So we are appreciative of the support that we are getting from our state of California as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing. That is great information. I mean, during this COVID period of social divide and economic challenges, we really need to dig deep to find out what do we need to create stability for the families. Do you have any ideas? I mean, you are experiencing developers coming in trying to buy out trailer parks, many of those which house immigrants, and the immediate impact that if that's allowed to happen, they slide further down the economic ladder. So what are some of the ideas? What are some of your experiences, and what are some of your ideas of what's necessary to create stability and safety for our families here?
But yeah, there is a Machiavellian saying, right? Never let a good crisis go to waste, right? I actually spent a summer working in Biloxi, Mississippi as a union organizer. And it was the same summer that Hurricane Katrina hit, and it decimated the Gulf Coast. And Biloxi wasn't spared. At the time, I was able to, I hunkered down, and then when the storm was over, made our way out and had an opportunity to come back and visit years later. Now, if you're not familiar with Biloxi, right, it's actually a small city, but it's the third largest gambling city in the entire country, behind Atlantic City and behind Las Vegas, right? So it's a coastal city right on the Gulf Coast. And if you go to the coast, there is just casino after casino after casino. Once Hurricane Katrina came and decimated not just the Gulf, the coastal areas, but some of the areas behind it. When I had the chance to come back and visit, some years later, the casinos had purchased all of the decimated land to expand on their entertainment centers. Right. This is kind of this is the same risk that we are in right now with the pandemic, right? Because as people are, there was a report released by Working Partnerships USA that says like tens of thousands of families in San Jose are at risk of eviction once the eviction moratorium is lifted here. People have not been able to pay their rent, right? But the way the eviction moratorium happens or works is not that you don't have to pay rent and you're good to go. It's that you don't get evicted for not paying rent. So as time has progressed over the past 5 months now, people are, if they're not able to pay rent, they are accruing this massive debt that is going to be very unlikely for people to be able to pay. So if they can't pay it back, they're going to be evicted. This is the risk that we're going to see here, because developers are looking. San Jose is just a ton of land, and so it has been a target for development for a while now. And we're going to see that people who are losing their homes, either it's going to be gobbled up by people who have big, massive incomes, and they can afford to pay, like, for the $1 million homes or the close to $1 million homes as prices have a little bit tapered. Or you're going to see developers come in to purchase out these big lots of land so that they can just turn it around and turn it into something else, right? Turn it into an office building or turn it into like a mega complex. And the issue, though, is, we have to make sure that people's homes that people get to stay in their homes, but not just right now. But if the government's saying, hey, shut everything down, you don't get to go to work, but hey, you still got to pay rent at some point. I mean, that's not that. We're basically squeezing out the people who are most vulnerable. And we are creating opportunities for developers to come in and buy up homes, or we're creating opportunities for flippers to come in and buy out these places and just flip it and rent it out to the next, family or next person who is making $150,000 a year because they work for one of the big tech companies here. And I want to be not hating on tech, right? I mean, tech is some amazing, innovative things here, but we have to acknowledge the dynamic that we are creating in this pandemic. And the dynamic that we're creating here for people for the families who have built their community, their homes here for decades and for their lifetime, and what risk is now present for those people who are living in those homes. Right? So for me, I think what we have to really do here is look at this entire concept of rent, and I think this actually should apply across the board. Right? If we were going to hunker down for this quarantine, we should have just paused everything. Right? Now, it's not just close down businesses, but you still got to pay your bills. It's stop the bills, right? Stop the mortgage, stop the interest payments, stop the credit card payments. Hold it all off so that we're all on the same page. We can come out of this, and I mean, ideally we come out of this stronger, but at the very least we come out of this not any worse, right? And so right now, if we're looking at specifically about how to protect families here, I think we actually need to go beyond just an eviction moratorium. We actually need to explore this idea of forgiving this debt, because for these thousands of families who are in this situation where they've now got amassed a huge debt that they have to pay, their inability to pay it means we're going to see an explosion of homelessness. We are going to see a terrible loss of the community that has been built here. We're going to see a massive transformation in the culture of neighborhoods and communities that we have here. And those are the things that we really have to be wary of and know that that's coming down the line. We can't just sit back and wait on this.
Absolutely, it's coming down the line. So I want to have a young perspective, because very rarely, Flor, do we have young guests, so we're grateful to have you. Listening to we talk about the ensuing eviction moratorium ending, I mean, how does that affect your community? Your young friends, are they living on their own? Are they living with families? How are they coping during these times? Our favorite thing to say, you're still muted.
Okay, you're able to see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, I mean, in San Jose out here, I know a few people that, go to school right here in San Jose State. They went back home because they got laid off or, everything. So a lot of people have been living back home, and a lot of people live like kind of crammed up, like 2 rooms per person, but living downtown. People just kind of have to get roommates. People my age, you gotta have roommates. People you can get along with, because I have I have 3-bedroom and it's $3,000. My friend, she has 3-bedroom and it's $3,250. So, if either one person can pay $1,000, you have 2 people in one room that pay $500 each, and then even then, people still moved back home. So it's not easy. But, if you able to, comfortably go back home, this is, I guess, a good time to save money and, save yourself. Because like you said, there's going to be a big change. Especially right here in San Jose, it's not cheap for anybody, and especially right here in the Bay Area, it's survival of the
fittest, right?
The fittest.
Yeah, whatever you call it. So Sammie, what's our moral response? We've listened to Mimi, and Flor's young people's perspective, right? They can survive anywhere. They're survivors. And you hear about we talking about, I mean, there's a responsibility and accountability. What do we do?
Yeah.
What's our moral responsibility?
So it's actually interesting that you brought up Biloxi, because I just watched a documentary this week. It's called Hell or High Water, the battle for Turkey Creek, which Turkey Creek is a small community just north of that general area that has been historically for 6 generations an African-American community that was founded by recently freed slaves. It's marshland, and they, 8 families bought adjoining plots of land, and then they would only give these recently freed slaves what they called worse land, right? Because it was marshland and you can't build like you really want to build, but they have stewarded it, and it has been their place for 6 generations. And those same developers, right, are trying to gobble it up. And I was thankful that you named the loss of culture that will happen, right? Because if we continue to push out communities of color and immigrant communities and just the rich cultural diversity that exists in San Jose, it will become unidentifiable, right? And I think the moral response that we have is to all of the people who call this place home and who want to call it home in the future, right? I mean, the Ohlone people are still here on these lands. This is something that has been really fascinating to me coming from the East Coast, right? Like there are communities of color who have been here since before white folks discovered it, right? And this, oh, it's funny, Ray, you're just a couple blocks away, so I can hear the train and I can hear it go through you. Our moral response, right, is to create opportunities and communities that thrive for all people, right? I mean, white supremacy is in my home, we say it's a heck of a drug, and it continues to divide us, and it continues to push out folks who white supremacists have decided just don't belong. And so our moral response is to fight that on every imaginable level that we can. And yeah, the developers, I don't want to divulge, or I don't want to devolve too much, but yes, buying up land, the inability to afford to live here, it's a moral imperative. It's got to stop.
So again, those who view immigrants as a positive thing, we need to move beyond just viewing immigrants and DACA as a positive thing. We need to do a course correction and focus on the policies, then holding our electeds accountable to the policies that we, the people, say we need here in Santa Clara County and the cities within Santa Clara County. Well, listen, this has been a rich discussion. I'm grateful. Mimi had to go, ladies and gentlemen. It's feeding time. She's on a rigid schedule. But Flor, I'm grateful that you were a part of this discussion. You're fresh air, a breath of fresh air for all of the old folks that have been previous to this episode of the Justice Project. As always, I enjoy my conversation. Of course, my sister Sammie, I am grateful that you have graced us. But before we go, anything specific that you want to share to your dreamers, Flor? What do they need to know? How do they keep motivated? How do they hang in there during this pandemic and during this most pervasive time?
I think it's really important that we use our privilege that we've been given, which is DACA. Like I mentioned before, immigrants live in fear, but dreamers do get a little bit of a break, and we need to use that little hint of privilege they gave us to defend the rest of the immigrants, because they only gave it to 800,000 of us, and there's millions of immigrants out there, and we actually need to be the ones sticking up for them, because like I mentioned, the immigrants without protection aren't going to show up. So if at least the dreamers, the immigrants with protection, like we can show up, we need to use that to our advantage. And you need to show up, dreamers, to these protests. You need to be there. I know you have nothing to be afraid of. I mean, we can't be afraid anymore. I mean, it's hurting all of us, and so if we're able to use our voice, if we're able to use this protection, we need to use it at the full extent, I see it like—
Right on.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say right on. I'm sorry, Kyle. Keep going.
Oh, yeah. No, I see it as a privilege. It's what allows me to, be in the front lines, comfortably. I use it as a protection, like, hey, I'm here to, fight for my rights, because you can't just, try to take me away. I have DACA. So, that's why I also fight a lot for DACA, because we need to at least keep that progress we've already made. Obviously, we demand a whole immigration, reform that, includes all the millions of immigrants. It's not just, the ones brought here as children. And we're determined to abolish ICE, because, at the first kid they lost, they should have been shut down. At the first kid they lost to a trafficker, which they admitted to in court, that some kids were placed by accident to traffickers. At that first site, they should have been abolished, and we need a new entity, for all these children, for all these families in cages, something that actually nourishes them and, educates them. And, and even if you get those kids out of cages, get them into, humane conditions, at least, while they figure out, the whole immigration progress they need to, get into, it's a lot coming into this country, not knowing anybody or anything. If there's at least, a program or a new entity for immigrants that will help them, towards the pathway to citizenship. I think that's something we want to demand, because, we need a whole immigration reform. The whole system's been messed up for immigrants, and as long as we do something about it, that's kind of the focus. And as long as us dreamers use our privilege, for the frightened immigrants, that's what I gotta say to the dreamers. We use your privilege. You need to use your privilege. The whole immigration community is depending on us in a way, along with our allies. Thank you to everybody that that comes out as allies. Like you said, what was your name again? Right here.
We? Yes.
The lady, or this lady. We. Hey, yes, we. Like you mentioned, yeah. So we gotta. Sorry, I got distracted, you guys. Thanks for inviting me, though. I haven't been on Zoom in a while, and I haven't been able to just talk, one-on-one about, what I do and everything I'm about, and what my, what my fight is. And I need dreamers to get on board. It's a lot of work, and I feel like I need help. I need help, you guys. I can't do this.
So what we're going to do, Flor, is I'm going to have an ask, but I want to make sure that you put your information in the Dropbox. We're going to hook you up with Teresita, who does our translation, our Spanish translation. And again, as I mentioned, there is a Dreamer in Action Facebook group that they just put together. So, but here's my ask of you. It's called 10, 10, 10, 10. In your protest and everything that you do for the undocumented, tell them that they can complete the census. It's their way of voting. They may not be able to vote, but they can complete the census. So you tell 10 and tell them to tell 10 and tell them to keep going until they run out of telling 10s. And then those who are eligible to vote, I want you to tell 10 folks to say vote, register to vote today, and be prepared to mail in your ballot on in October. So whatever you need, you reach back out to us and we got you. So thank you for showing up today. Sammie, what are your parting words for us?
Oh man, just keep on. Just keep on. I mean, I feel like we are in the middle of a storm. The waters are choppy, but we just got to keep going, right? Coming together, educating each other, being with each other, standing for each other.
Right on. Thank you. And my brother Wee, what do you have for us?
Sorry, making sure I unmute here. But, this past summer, you asked us what kind of drove us through this pandemic, and honestly, seeing all of the activism, seeing the energy, seeing that uprising really coming from roots, that has been what has carried me through this summer, I'll tell you that. So, I think the message that we got to carry forward is that this doesn't stop. You have to keep going, you have to keep fighting, right? And I actually do want to send out a message for, folks who are watching who have this mindset of, hey, I made it and I don't got to worry about anybody else, because this is, to be honest, this is kind of what we see a lot of in the Vietnamese community, right? Like John Lewis just passed away, right? If our presence right now, if in our life right now, we've been able to survive and thrive in a way through the opportunities that were not present just a few decades ago, maybe five decades ago, right? But we have those opportunities now. We have people like fighters to thank for that. Fighters like John Lewis, like Flor, right? Like Sammie, like you, Ray, Reverend Ray. We have to thank those people for it, right? If we are in a position now where we see ourselves and say, hey, you know what? I don't have to worry about anybody else because I made it here. We have to remember that those opportunities, that blessing, it didn't just exist. People fought for that, right? So we can't stop fighting for that because those can just as easily be taken away. And the opportunities that we think we have can disappear in a heartbeat, in the blink of an eye. So all of this struggle that we have seen this summer, we've got to keep it going, carry it forward. And honestly, if people feel like, hey, this isn't my fight, right? It is, right? Because here's the thing: even if we say we're not part of the story, right? Hassan Minhaj again said this by beautiful piece. We say we're not part of the story, except we're at the scene of the crime, right? George Floyd murder, there was a Hmong officer there, right? The storekeeper who called the officers was, I believe, Pakistani, right? We can't just come in and say, hey, everything is great and dandy, and then ignore all of the bad. We have a moral obligation to stand up for the people around us as well.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate your voice being here. I think all of you. Hey, today is the 55th anniversary of the passage of the Voter Rights Act. Right. John Lewis, who was knocked unconscious at the Edmund Pettus Bridge. This is one of his initiatives. At the age of 19, 20, he got involved. He got off the bench. So people died so that people of color, people who aren't white, could vote. The census is a big, important part of what we have going on. Experts say that 68% are counted in California. And the new census deadline is now September 30th. It was October 31st, but political powers have moved it to September 30th. Let's shed light on some facts before I let you go. And remember, this is part one of a big conversation around immigration and DACA. It'd be great to get it all in, but it's just not going to happen. But while we have Flor here and all the young folks and that are going to be following her, we got to give them some facts. The lie is, it's a citizenship question. The fact is, there is no such question. The court struck it down. So on the census, they won't be asking about your citizenship. The lie is your information can be shared with ICE. The fact is, no one can share your data. It is illegal and violators will go to jail. Immigrants can lose local schools and health clinics if undercounted. This is why it's so important when we talk about our immigrant community. You may not be able to vote, but your power is in your census. If we don't fill out the census, immigrants can lose local schools and health clinics if undercounted. Santa Clara County is #1 as the most diverse immigrant population in California, and Latinos are the largest immigrant community of color. So we must tell our brothers and sisters, don't worry about fear, don't worry, and don't believe the lie. We need you to count, just like we need your vote. So I want to welcome you all for joining us. Again, Sammie, Flor, and Mimi having to leave. We're grateful for your presence. Thank you for joining us. It is my prayer that this message will permeate through our community, that we'll share it, we'll spread it, and come back with us next week as we do Immigration and DACA Part 2. Again, thank you all for joining us. Shalom and peace be yours.
See you guys.
Don't
Peace,
go anywhere
everyone.
yet, Flor. Hang on a second. Let me say thank you.
I would love to talk to you. Yeah.